struck out 213 so far and counting, the most since Gaylord Perry struck out 216 guys in 1974. And that number will continue to climb as he gets a few more starts under his belt here down the stretch. But, like you texted me this morning, I do agree with you. And I am, some of it is having some fun because you're in the last month of a baseball season. And if you can't have some fun and wear the rally cap and wear the same socks for 13 straight days if they don't lose games, whatever your superstition is, if you can't do it now, you're not having enough fun with sports. You're taking it way, way, way too seriously. But, in all reality, you needed to sweep this series. You have to take, these are the ones you have to. You don't just take 2 out of 3. I thought the stage was set for the Tribe to do that here, the way they took the first game. Kluber's lining up second. Bam. Danks, likes to do the Indians some favors from time to time. I'm thinking, okay, this could be a good one to take all 3. Last night stops that. You have to win tonight. It is a must win. It's not it would be nice. You have to win tonight.
Yeah, I agree, and kind of like we were texting back and forth this morning. For all my snarky and pessimistic comments for the summer, when I say win is the 10-game wins, that's exactly true. And in my mind, that's kind of what is happening now. Is they've put themselves behind the 8 ball at times with poor play and poor defense, and the schedule is sizing up for them nicely. We've talked about all of that, but the thing is, winning series at this point against inferior teams isn't quite good enough because they're trying to make up ground. And I look at the Minnesota series, Kluber's last start that they did. That was a very sweepable series there, and the same thing with the White Sox here. Like you said, you win the first game and you see Kluber throw in the second game, and you think, this should be another series where you go sweep and salvage a series win. Now, where I don't think winning series is acceptable or good enough if you're going to the play. Continue to contend, and I think that belief of contention is slowly predict doom and gloom. But on here and talk about the new most important stretch of the schedule, but I think you definitely have to get a win tonight and win that series, and then you're staring down 7 in a row with Kansas City and in Detroit, and how you handle those games probably determines what you're really playing.
And I got to tell you, the double kicker with last night to me is that we've mentioned kind of with the teams in front of you and not controlling your own destiny. Last night, a game you had in Detroit, drop that one. It seems like when you win, they win. When you lose, they lose. Here, you could have been 3.5 back of the wild card heading into tonight's game, So those are the kickers right there when you look ahead and you see that. I mentioned that, while they've heated up here with winning 10 of 14, they did separate from some teams, but you still have that big grouping there, and everyone counts here coming down the stretch. You've got to win tonight, and then you've got the big ones, the division coming up in front of you, where you still control your own destiny. And I've been saying it for a couple of weeks now. As much as it's because the number's a slight bit smaller, it's only 2 games different. But you look at the wild card, and your thought is naturally, well, that must be the easier way to get to the playoffs. But in actuality, to me, it's still through the division because you control that. You have enough games against those teams that you can still claw your way back into that thing and win the division outright rather than having to leapfrog 3 or 4 other teams.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, when you start talking about the wild card, probably about a third of the American League is involved in that race. So as crazy as it sounds, I mean, I almost think looking at the standings for the next week is almost a waste of time because so many teams are involved in what they're doing. And, I think the most important thing, if the Indians are going to be serious in September in contending, is, they have to take care of themselves and how they handle these 8 games, tonight in Chicago and then the next 7. That's all that really matters. And, some of that I think will sort itself out over those 8 days, those 8 games, because, I mean, obviously, if you go 3-5 or God forbid worse, you don't need to look at the standings anymore because you're going to be out of it. And if you do, put together a nice stretch and say win, 6 out of 8 of those, you're going to pass some teams. And I think, determining which playoffs will become a little clearer after that stretch. But I think, the number one key, and I think it has been all season, is, the Indians have to take care of themselves. And if they can do that, I think things will clear up as far as, what's their best route to get into the postseason. But, the key, I think, is they've got to string together a stretch, and they've got to do it. They've got to do it now, basically. I don't even think soon is on the table anymore. It's got to be now.
And I'll tell you, I've brought this up a couple times over the last 2 weeks. I mentioned the 14-game stretch that ends here with today's run, and I said, to me, 10, 11, 10 is your minimum that you had to take, in my thought, in that thing, if you were truly a contender. And if the Indians win today, they will have won 9 of those games. So just a hair below the number that I said. And that's par for the season, being just a notch below where you said, well, that's the minimum to be in contention. Well, they're that. And I think that synopsis right there is one for the whole season, being good enough to be right there, but then falling just a hair short of where you needed to be. And I think that kind of sums a lot of this up. Looking at that, I said, hey, minimum, you got to take 10 to say, hey, we got a shot at this. They can possibly take 9 of them. But, still, even though it's not 10 in a row, and even though you lose a game like you did last night, you're still talking about winning 10 of 14, 11 of 15, whatever it is in the last couple of weeks. Step up from the up and down, win 3, lose 3, win 4, lose 4.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it's funny because one of our writers, Steve Eby, and I were talking last night, and I said, as the Indians have played better in the second half, and they have put together this nice little stretch, I still feel like it's probably too little, too late for their playoff hopes, but 2 things in this stretch I've really taken out of this. And first, we talked about this, I think, a couple weeks ago, but to me it is just more clear every night. Terry Francona is just an amazing manager to watch on a day-to-day basis, because he is managing every game every night like it is a must-win game. And I think he has to. I think for all the reasons we've talked about, if they're gonna remain in it, I think every game is a must-win. But the way he operates his bullpen, and the way he knows that this offense is far from perfect, and all the sabermetricians out there, I love watching them go crazy on Twitter as he drops down another sacrifice bunt. But they know that they're flawed, and they know that they're not perfect. And Terry Francona is doing everything on a night in and night out basis to hide their flaws and accentuate their strengths, to try and get every win out of them that they possibly can. And I think the job he has done in the second half, especially since the trade deadline, is amazing. And I think to go with that, you're definitely seeing some players maybe don't have the role that they currently have now, but can be contributors on a 2015 team that can make the playoffs and can be contenders. And I think both of those things are really, I don't know if exciting is the right word, because if you're not going to the playoffs and you're underachieving your goals, that's not a lot to be excited about. But I think those 2 things, kind of give me some hope for the future, because I think as long as Terry Francona is in that dugout, I think this team will in some way always, be a factor in the American League.
You can have hope for the future, and I'm looking good to the future too, but my destiny is now. Destiny is happening now, Mike Brandenberry. The future is nice when you're done dealing with today. And I know I'm having some fun, but the Indians, it's all in their hands.
I don't know who this girl Destiny is you keep talking about, but I thought we were talking about the Indians.
I'm just telling you, man. She's a cold-hearted woman, man. She one day she's got your back, and the next day she's jumped to somebody else. You got to take your window while you can, man. It's there for the Indians. And again, I'm telling you, they're gonna run this thing down, and I'm gonna go, hey, remember August 28th? Yeah, when everybody called me crazy, but it's fun, man. And I agree with you about Frank.
I can't wait to tell you that you were right and that I never believed in you.
I'm telling you, man.
I can't wait to.
I love it. I can't wait till I get to sit around and watch everybody in town go, see, See, I told you. I knew it. I told you. And I'm like, no, you didn't. No, I was the guy that got the cold pizza and the warm drinks when I was telling everybody that. They're like, that guy's crazy. No, seriously, though, it's going to be fun to watch it. Hopefully, as you said, when they come out of this next stretch here with Kansas City and Detroit, they haven't been, pushed back to where you go, okay, regardless, leverage games mean something. Even if it comes down to the end, it still makes the last month of a season mean a whole lot more. And again, all I'm going to say is they got the Giambino warming up. They've got the orchestra playing. The same suspects are gathering back together against the same teams in the same month as we're coming down the stretch of the season. That's all I'm saying is the band is ready to play another song, and I'm going to have some fun watching it here, but they've got to come out and take care of business. All joking aside, they're 3 games above 500 in the second half, 500 first half. So as you can see, that's where they're about there. They keep 2. They get past the 3 over, they get to 4, and they get come back down to 3 again. Like, can you get it to 5? Because we were just talking yesterday. If you get it to 5, then you can start trying to build and try to get yourself to 6 or 8 or 10 games above 500 there. And circling back to Francona, I'll argue with anybody. I said it yesterday. I said there's people, and I can't argue with some of the mistakes that Terry Francona's made this season. And people, well, this proves that he doesn't know what he's doing, and he's the worst manager. And I'm like, listen, the reason that there's a few more things for you to complain about is because he's had about 5,000 more opportunities. It's just like batting. When a guy has 100 at bats, you have a much smaller sample size. He's going to have a few more strikeouts when he bats 500 times, but it's still, you know what I'm saying? He's had so much more difficulty to handle this season with the rotation, everything. I mean, I can name any part of the team depending on what 6-week stretch you're looking at. So yeah, there's more that you can say, well, he messed up here. Okay, well, because last year, Bruce brought it up in a phone call. He had a lot of the same lineup, a lot of less issues, all the things we've brought up about him. And so to me, I think you're nuts, and I question what you're looking at when you look at this team sitting 3 games above 500 right now. What did you call them in your last article? Maybe the worst 500 playoff chasing team in history. But seriously, for them to be there, it's all Terry Francona. I don't care if you don't believe that. Then I question what you're watching if you think that they would do better with a different manager.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think every manager, would admit, probably at the end of the season that if they had a crystal ball and could go back in time, they'd do some things differently. And I don't think Terry Francona is any different than that. That's for sure. I think nobody's perfect and everybody makes mistakes, and I would agree. I think if we're gonna be critical of Francona, I think one of his things, his positive in my mind is also his negative, in that he is a player's manager to the nth degree, and I think sometimes he lives and dies with his veterans, and talking about Bruce's frustration with sticking with lineups for a while. He's dedicated to those guys, and we love it when it works, and it's frustrating when it doesn't. But that's the guy that Terry Francona is, and like I said, I don't think anyone is perfect, but I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think the way they play every night. And I'll go back to it time and time again. But if you look at this season versus 2012, where they were at the trade deadline and how the team has handled moves, or in 2012, a lack of moves, moving forward, is night and day. In 2012, a team managed by Manny Acta and a young team did not handle that well, and it nosedived. And now what is, in a lot of ways, a pretty young team saw 2 veterans leave at the deadline, and really could have had every reason to bag it. Has, on top of it, hasn't bagged it, has played better baseball since the trade deadline. And I think, Terry Francona is a huge part of, that difference from 2012 to 2014.
And you know what? I'll add just a little caveat to that is not only have they played better here down the stretch of this season, but done it with I don't want to say a lesser supporting cast, a lesser experienced supporting cast. They have replaced